an organization that promotes voter education and advocacy. I'm Annette Tucker Sutherland, chair of the Shaker chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. We invited the mayor to present tonight a State of the City address in order to share information and to nurture community engagement. The mayor is elected for 4-year terms. As chief executive, he oversees all city staff and operations and implements decisions by city council. The city's annual budget is roughly $66 million operating and $8 million capital. David Weiss was appointed by elected city council members when former Mayor Earl Lycan resigned in 2018. Mayor Weiss was then elected in 2019 and plans to seek re-election this fall. His professional background is more than 30 years' experience in law and business, particularly in real estate development. He retired from DDR Corp., a real estate investment company, as executive vice president, secretary, and general counsel. While working full-time in law, he served on Shaker Heights City Council and as a member of city committees on planning and zoning. Before the mayor speaks, I need to introduce our moderator for the evening, Marcia Goldberg. Marcia has served in many League of Women Voters positions over many years. She recently represented the League in a Cleveland City Club forum called Looking Back, Looking Forward, Reflections on County Government Reform, where she outlined the League's advocacy for the county's 2011 transition to a charter form of government. Marcia?
Thank you, Annette. After the mayor's presentation, I'll be looking through cards with questions, and I'll be giving questions to the mayor. Anyone can submit questions tonight. To avoid repetition, we'll gather questions for a small panel of volunteers to organize and sometimes summarize the questions being handed to me. Shaker Heights High School students Caroline Connell and Matilda Spadoni will accept questions on note cards from audience members here. Caroline, a high school junior, is the League's current Legacy Fellow. We are also monitoring the live stream of this meeting for questions from our virtual audience. We can accept questions on Zoom via the question function or the chat function. We'll try to include all the questions and topics within the time available this evening, but we need to conclude by 8:30. To support engagement that's civil and constructive, we ask you to follow a few guidelines. Please avoid finger pointing or inflammatory language. Speak from your own experience rather than generalizing. If questions or answers become repetitive or unproductive, we'll move to another topic. We'll begin with a prepared presentation from Mayor Weiss, then we'll be open for questions. Mayor Weiss.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for trudging through the ice and snow and rain to get here this evening. So very much appreciate it. On behalf of City Council and myself and the administration, I want to thank you all for attending, and those of you online listening. Annette and Marcia, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and a thank you to the League of Women Voters for Shaker Heights for your tireless efforts to promote democracy and encourage civic engagement. I'd like to especially call out our council members that are here, Nancy Moore, Ann Williams, former council member, where are we? Oh, Carmela Williams there. I didn't see you sneak in. Carmela Williams. We have former council member Jan Devereaux as well. So with respect to council, I just want to express publicly how much I appreciate the work and dedication that they have shown on a wide range of topics. We've had a busy year, and we all are running fast and hard, and they have provided great leadership and support. So I thank them. A couple other people I'd just like to mention. Dr. David Klasner, the superintendent of schools, is with us, and Amy Schweitzer, the director of the library. So we appreciate you both joining as well. And then nothing happens in the city without, frankly, our staff that is just absolutely remarkable. So maybe the people online may not be able to see this, but if the management team, these are all directors of departments, just stand up and just express, and just give them a round. This management team works really, really hard. So I just want to, again, express my appreciation to them as well. Lastly, before we start, I would be remiss if I didn't just pause for a moment and acknowledge the loss of our former judge, KJ Montgomery, recently. KJ was a longtime judge, really a terrific person, a woman of many talents, a consummate professional, both lawyer and as judge, a supporter of a wide range of charitable causes, an unbelievable vocalist. If you never heard her sing, then you really missed something. But she was absolutely fabulous, and just a dear friend and colleague to many of us. So I just wanted to take a moment, maybe just a pause of silence in her memory. Thank you. So, as I said, we've got a lot on our plate. We got a lot of things going on. So I'm going to be probably a little bit quicker than I might normally be, and I'll wait for some of the questions maybe to go into a little bit more detail. But let me just start by saying that going back to 2021, council and the management team had a retreat where we worked on our vision, mission, values, and goals. And we set a series of goals that would guide us in our decision making and keep us on track with the city's priorities. We will be doing that again this year to reevaluate our goals and priorities. But for tonight's purposes, I've grouped the activities and the highlights of 2022 into the 8 categories that reflect the goals set by council and the administration. I am not going to go into a lot of detail on some. I will just touch on. Some are big that you've probably heard about. Some are maybe some smaller items that you may not have been as focused on. So hopefully you'll be reinforced in what you know and learn something perhaps new. So with that, let me start with our first goal, which is summarize. It's actually longer, but I'm going to, for this purpose, summarize it in providing superior response and service delivery. I'm going to just start with the nuts and bolts, the blocking and tackling of our Public Works Department. Patty Spees, our director. This year, we oversaw the resurfacing of over 10 miles of road, including the entire length of Chagrin as it runs through the. We also oversaw nearly $2 million of vital water and sewer improvements. These things aren't necessarily very exciting all the time, but are absolutely necessary and critical to keep our community and our city competitive. In the year ahead, which has been in the works for quite a while, is the Linfield-Lomond Sewer Project. This was a replacement of sewer and water lines along Lomond. The goals of this are to prevent basement flooding, which continues to be an issue, prevent discharge into this unpermitted sewage into our sewer system. And this project is the largest sewer project that we have ever undertaken at a price somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range. Lots of people have been involved with this, including those that know very little about sewers like myself, but know a lot more about things like trees and how can we do a project like this and make sure that we maintain our trees in that part of town. On the technology side, as we consider that part of infrastructure and services, CitizenServe is our cloud-based platform that we have been rolling out for a little while now. We were one of 6 communities that piloted this program. It's now grown to 10. The benefits of this system, again, are increased efficiency, 24/7 online services, shortened turnaround for reports, and increased transparency. We have rolled this out in a number of areas and will this current year expanded to include permitting and plan review and point of sale inspections, which I think will be beneficial to many of us in the community. Let me jump now to some key services, police and fire. Just to highlight the fact that with respect to crime in the city, it has been steadily declining now for a number of decades, and particularly over the last 5 or 6 years are at really all-time lows, which is good to just use some good common sense and lock your car doors when you get out. But otherwise, the various categories of crime still continue to decline. So that's a very positive, a real positive. Unlike crime that is decreasing, fire, unfortunately, and EMS continues to rise. We had nearly 5,000 calls for service. About 68% of those were EMS, and the balance of 32% fire and rescue. Training remains a critical part for all of our first responders, but in particular, fire undertook about 14,000 hours of training this year amongst the department. The fire department also was very active, of course, during COVID and the pandemic, between vaccinations and offering COVID testing. Chief Sweeney and Assistant Chief Heath were really leaders in working with us and leading us through that pandemic. We'll talk, so I won't go into a lot of detail now, but we started with the help on a collaborative effort of council, the administration, and a number of residents in the community. We started a pilot program, a mental health response team, where we have embedded a mental health responders. Annette Stadi has been very active with our first responders. She started out on a part-time basis. It is now a full-time employee of the city and working full-time and providing critical services for the increasing number of mental health calls that we continue to see in the city, providing both de-escalation where appropriate and then additional services beyond the calls. I will just mention that this program has gotten a lot of attention. We're the only ones in Cuyahoga County that have a program like this. I've gotten a number of calls from other communities that would like to learn more about what we're doing and have had several conversations with the new county executive, Chris Ronayne, who also is interested in perhaps partnering with us on this program. The second goal, financial health and sustainability. This chart, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit hard to see and read on here, but this is a metric that we have been looking at really since several decades ago that was really reinforced when we adopted the strategic investment plan about 20 years ago. But what it shows is a decreasing reliance on individual taxes and an over time increasing reliance on business taxes paid by employees of businesses. So the green is the individual tax, and you see it going down as this is as a percentage of total expenditure or total revenues, going from 74% to 50 down to 57%, and the business taxes going from 24 up to 39%. So moving very much in the right direction. Couple other data points to show the strength of our community. First of all, the Van Aken district, just to give you a sense of the magnitude and the importance of this incredible project that we have in our community. We're projecting for 2022 about $735,000 in taxes generated from phase one of the Van Aken district. Meaningful dollars for the city. Our bond rating, we issued some sewer improvement bonds this past year, and we received a very high rating of AA+ by Standard & Poor's, and received specific call out for strong management practices, favorable financial performance, and manageable debt and long-term liability. Our finance director, John Potts, has worked tirelessly on this, and so we appreciate his efforts in his department. We also have a reserve. We're projecting that the reserve for the end of 2022 will be about 42%, and that represents the general fund balance as a percent of our total annual disbursements. So that has continued to rise over time with lots of flexibility to do some of the, ultimately to do some of the major projects that we're looking at. Investment earnings, although interest rates going up is not necessarily a good thing for most of us, from a bottom line for the city, however, it is. We have gone from earnings in 2021, investment earnings of about $225,000 to due in large part to the efforts of Director Potts to manage maturities and keeping flexibility to take advantage of rates. Grants and loans. I have to say that Shaker Heights and our staff is incredibly adept at finding dollars all over the place. And so this past year, we received grants and one zero interest loan of $28.5 million. Those are funds coming from outside the city to help fund everything from public works infrastructure to the Linfield-Lomond water and sewer project and the Lee Road action plan. Green space and public space are another high priority. I'm going to just touch very, very briefly on these. The Donebrook Restoration Project, I suspect most of you are generally familiar with that, and I'm happy to go into plenty of detail about that in the Q&A. But suffice to say that we are still in the pre-design phase. We will go into the detailed design in the next year, and then 2 years of construction at Horseshoe Lake, from restoring the branches of the Doan Brook to new plants, trails, brook crossings. And this has been quite a partnership between the city, the sewer district, and the community, providing feedback as to what they would like to see at Doan Brook. This is probably the largest project we will have done ever in terms of green space. Trees, our tree program remains strong as ever. We had almost 450 new trees planted in 2022, as well as grant-funded efforts by volunteers that resulted in another 140 native species and trees and shrubs. We were again named a Tree City by the Arbor Day Foundation for the 37th year in a row. Give a shout out to Councilmember Moore for shepherding our tree advisory board and our efforts there for many, many years. I'll mention just very briefly, but this is one of the ones that you may not know a lot about. And again, I'm going to give a shout out to Councilman Kara Hamley O'Donnell from our staff that worked in cooperation with the Historical Society and the Public Library to complete a historic preservation master plan for the Warrensville West Cemetery, which if you're not familiar with, it's right next to the exit to Heinens. It is the second oldest burial ground in Cuyahoga County, with the first burials in about 1811. So the next step beyond the master plan will be to eventually pursue grant dollars for repairing and resetting gravestones. So an exciting project that you might not have necessarily heard about. And then the public realm at the Van Aken District. This is the area near the end of the Blue Line, where Joyce Braverman and our planning department has been working hard with the RTA and others to improve that area, adding public art, landscaping, and the RTA is going to be putting in a new station there. So it will look very, very different when that project is all done. Recreation is another topic, another goal, council. The goal here is to really start to do a deep dive into the level and type of recreation services that we want to provide as a city based on demand and available resources, and to make sure that we're delivering quality and accessible programming. 3,000 people participated this year in a wide range of activities through our recreation department. There were 175,000 visits recorded through the pool, just the pool and the rink at Thornton Park. We have gone out recently with a community attitude survey. You may have, some of you may have received it, out to about 3,000 of our residents. And there are some questions in recreation that will start as the basis for our recreation analysis. And then council is undertaking discussions about how to expand and enlarge that process, including public engagement. We do that in conjunction with the library and the schools in particular, with respect to the schools plans, which I'm sure, I won't go into those now because I'm sure we'll get some questions and be happy to chat with you about that. But all of this happening kind of simultaneously. The next goal, a key component for us is human capital talent. We have a program to retain and attract both a diverse resident population around, led by Ann McGuire, our communications and marketing director. And we had touches of more than 5,000 people over the course of the year through a wide range of methods. In particular, we have been this year focused on empty nesters and young families. I have to just say anecdotally, going to block parties as I do every summer, the number of young families that I am meeting with people coming back to our community is just astounding. So we're trying to make sure that source, as well as empty nesters who have reached out to me and council and others who have said, we'd like to stay in Shaker Heights, but we don't see X, Y, or Z. We would like this type of housing or these kinds of services to stay in our community, and we would very much like to meet those expectations. Again, we were very pleased this year to be named the best place to raise a family by Northeast Ohio Parent Magazine. So the word gets out, but we want to build and expand upon that. On the staff front, our long-time police chief, Chief Jeff DeMuth, just recently retired, and he did an unbelievable job for over 3 decades. But we have replaced him with someone equally capable, and we're looking forward to him. Chief Hudson is here. Just stand up, Chief, so people can see you. Omaha, with a deep background in law enforcement, a commitment to the community and to community planning, and with really exceptional interpersonal and communication skills. He is perfect for a community like Shaker, and we are very pleased to have him and welcome him very much. Staffing, always important. In the policing area, we are not at full staffing and have a number of open positions. And so we are aggressively pursuing ways to fill those positions, everything from signing bonuses to referral fees, and relying on Chief Hudson, who had great success in Douglas County, to bring some new ideas to Shaker and fill out our policing staff. I wanted to mention, although she's been here a little longer than a year, but it's her first full year, Colleen Jackson, our Chief Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Officer. Colleen, just stand for a moment in case. If you've not had a chance to meet Colleen, I would suggest that you do. She's got an interesting background, and I'll leave that one hanging so that people can start to think about interesting background, but has found her way to DEI work and is doing a fabulous job. She staffs our DEI committee of council, which is also made up of council members and citizens. She's very active in a wide range of things, both internally and externally. Of late, most recently, the Martin Luther King event that we had at the high school in conjunction with the library and the schools and the city, an example of cooperative working relationship between the three bodies. She's doing things internally, things like training this year in a number of different areas for the entire staff, everyone in our in City Hall. Sustainability and environmental sustainability. This is an area that has increasingly received attention from the administration, from council, and from our residents, and have had all kinds of incredible ideas and thoughts and initiatives. I'm only going to just touch on, there are many, many. We recently have confirmed the pricing for a green electric aggregation program. For those of you who are not familiar with it, there's a lot of information on the website. This is a program where the city of Shaker aggregates electricity in our community and purchases that in bulk through the aggregation process. But we've also purchased renewable energy credits, or RECs as they are known, which essentially makes the purchase of our or use of our electricity 100% green. Which was really quite a feat. This is something we've never done before, and our hope is that if this is fully rolled out and adopted, we could prevent over 100 million pounds of CO2 emissions per year, a huge impact for the environment. Electric vehicles, something near and dear to my heart, as well as many others. For those of you who don't know, I've had an electric to encourage that within the community by the access, whether you're on the east or west or south sides of town. We'll be adding at least 12 more and hopefully more during the course of the year. We also are expanding our purchase and transition to electric equipment, whether it be mowers, like you see in the picture, to our first electric vehicle, as well as leaf blowers and weed whackers. Director Spees is rolling them out wherever we can find equipment to do that. So again, something that really sets us apart. Sustainability, environmental, but also social sustainability. And that's an effort that we have undertaken in a wide range of contexts, everything from our block parties to our Moreland neighbor nights, with the purpose to strengthen civic engagement, grow neighborhood pride, and create connections among neighbors. The Moreland Traffic Calming Project, that may be another project you may or may not have heard of, but we're using techniques to calm traffic on concerns of safety in the neighborhood, very much in conjunction with the residents, with all kinds of input and ideas. A great process. Again, Colleen spearheaded a DEI conversation in the community with over 40 people attending from all 9 neighborhoods, providing an opportunity to have some of those tough and interesting conversations that we in Shaker like to have. And then we're trying to expand access. So we started this year with the chats with the mayor. I welcome people to come, usually once a month. Drop in, no agenda. You can talk to me about anything and everything that you'd like to. It's been successful, and I have a great time doing it, and we intend to continue to use that format. Housing, obviously the bread and butter of Shaker Heights. The goal here is to make sure we continue to invest in both new and existing housing, but also that we have a diversity of high quality and well-maintained new housing that will permit a growth of additional attractive housing styles to meet the needs and desires of of both current and future residents. Of programs that just to again scratch the surface. We have an infill housing program that we have been working on for quite a while that is really now gaining traction, where we're encouraging developers to come in and build on vacant lots, selected vacant lots throughout the community to get lots that are underutilized back into productive use as homes. Right now, we are working with a number of developers, and the pipeline is about 45 or so properties in various stages, from under construction to under contract to be developed, and others that are in the review process. But an opportunity for new construction to complement our historic housing stock. Our side lot program also continues, where lots that are not being used for redevelopment can be purchased by adjoining property owners. For those that would like a larger lot, where we don't typically have lots as large as some of these, where you have a double lot. And that program continues and has been very successful. And it's also successful from a financial standpoint, from the city's perspective, because we're saving money as for maintenance and upkeep and landscaping for those lots. Approved continuing contact with the Home Repair Resource Center. This is a not-for-profit that helps administer a number of housing programs, from exterior maintenance grants to senior exterior maintenance grants, paint grants, senior safety grants, as well as the Moreland Model Block program. Council approved $125,000 for these programs. We're hoping through another grant that we've applied for that we could add another $50,000 to those programs. I thought I would just touch for a moment on the status of the housing market. I'll just give you a couple stats for all the work that we all do on our homes and the efforts that we make. The question often comes up as to how successful are we being? Well, this chart may be a little tough to see, but this shows the median price by housing type. The top green line is single families. The middle line, the yellow, is duplexes and three family structures. And then the blue line are condos, all showing pretty dramatic increases in median home pricing from 2020 through 2022. Days on market is another measurement that we use for the strength of the market. And again, in all cases, single family, two family, and condominiums, the number of days on market from listing to being sold has continued to drop. Just to give one example, single family homes on the market in 2020 were about 45 days. And in 2022, it was down to 22 days. So a very robust and active in terms of finding new housing types to suit a diversity of people and needs, we have a number of projects underway. First is our Van Aken Phase 2. First time we've seen a crane up in Shaker Heights in many, many years. But this is a very exciting project, 228 units in two towers on the old Farnsley parking lot, an underutilized piece of property since 1965. No activity on that site. So this will add additional density, vibrancy, and connectivity to the Van Aken district. Again, 228 rental units. Harbor Chase is the assisted living and memory care unit that's almost complete now on Van Aken, just east of Lee Road. 108 units. I was over there last week, And it is absolutely beautiful. They are taking reservations. The line is growing. A new developer and operator to our city, but one that is been highly recommended. They are doing a terrific job, been great to work with. And we're very pleased. Again, quite a demand from residents of the city to have those either for themselves or for parents whom they would like to have closer by. The Van Aken Mews are the townhomes that are going up at Van Aken and Onaway. There are 6 that are under construction, if you've driven by recently, with another 12 to come. And then Arcadia is the project right across from the Shaker Rocks. It's the empty lot there. And I mentioned it under housing because there's housing, but it's really also economic development. So I will come back to that in just a moment. The 8th and last goal is economic development, to ensure that we develop and maintain vibrant commercial districts through public and private partnerships and other innovative approaches. So I should mention that one of the great things about Shaker Heights is that all of these projects that I'm going to mention are all transit-oriented developments. You may have seen Cuyahoga County has a major initiative, as well as the RTA, to encourage development around multimodal transportation. Better than Shaker Heights to do that. So we have the Van Aken district, phase 2 that I just mentioned. The Lee Road Action Plan, again, we can talk about this all night long. I get pretty fired up about it. But this is an initiative that council and administration and the community, again, have partnered on to basically completely transform the Lee Road corridor running from from Van Aken, Chagrin, all the way down to Scottsdale to the border. The idea here is to completely transform this corridor into a thriving, vibrant, walkable, bikeable, and transit-friendly commercial district. We have engaged the community, hundreds of residents, particularly, across the community, but particularly from Moreland and Lomond on either side of this corridor. We're now working to finalize the master plan for this corridor, which will include site work, intermodal transportation, urban design and streetscape, and economic development strategies. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about this, staff is going to be making a presentation to council later this month, February 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Is Jacob, hopefully? Yes. So feel free to join us for that as well. And then Arcadia. So Arcadia, as I mentioned, is a mixed use project that we're currently working with the developer on across from Shaker Rocks. It's has a combination of retail, office space, and 140 housing units. This project is particularly important for several reasons. First, it provides mixed use, which will enhance and add value to the Van Aken district. It also will have some office space. RDL Architects, who are architects in the city today, have run out of space at their current offices, have committed to both be a tenant in this project, as well as be the architect of record. So that's very important from a financial standpoint to keep them in the community. And then we have residential units as well. One other component of this particular project that is different is that there will also be an affordable housing component. That was part of the RFP that we went out for 2 developers for this site. And the developer that was chosen is very anxious to work with us and has worked on projects like this, including those with affordable housing, and are very knowledgeable. And so we look forward to finalizing that transaction in the coming days and weeks. Lastly, I will just mention, because it falls into that category of innovative approaches to economic development, I want to just take a minute to mention the Shaker Lee Development Fund. This is a community-based economic and real estate development entity that is governed by a board of directors, including residents adjoining the area which of interest, which in this case is the Lee Road corridor. It's managed by the Shaker Heights Development Corporation. And what it does is essentially raises money from various sources to channel those dollars through a social impact investing structure where those dollars are put back into the community to acquire property, to redevelop property, and enhance and prime the development. The building that you see here, which is 3700 Lee Road, is one of the buildings that the fund acquired. And that in funds through the fund for renovation, along with a storefront renovation program. If you get a chance, you should really see this building. It is absolutely terrific. The fund raised a total of just under currently $740,000, made up of cash and properties that were ceded to the fund. Approach to priming and read. So with that, let me just say is hopefully you've gotten a sense. 2022 was a pretty busy year, and 23 will be equally busy and productive. As I mentioned, we'll be going into our retreat later this spring, and I look forward to updating you on any updates that we have to our goals and our mission. Let me just close by saying that I recognize, and our staff and the council recognizes, that the projects that we've undertaken are really transformational for our community and are not ones that are going to happen overnight. Now, you may have heard that Van Aken District took 20 years to get to from start to open of phase one. I'm hoping that we won't go 20 years for things like the Lee Road corridor, but these are critical projects for our community. The Lee Road, Donebrook, recreation, Van Aken. I'm a big believer in planting seeds, tending to your crop, and knowing that in the long run, made a substantial and meaningful impact to the community long term. So we have a long way to go, but a lot of great things ahead of us. So with that, I will stop and turn it back to the league.
You'll be on the spot, I think. So I wanted to start by saying I've lived here for 40 years, and I cannot recall a time that the city and school district have had so many projects either underway or in the planning stages. It makes me think of you as juggling not only municipal projects and city planning proposals from private entities, some of which are sparking intense public interest, but also projects you have to juggle with other governmental entities, including our own school district, the RTA, the Regional Sewer District, and now University Heights. I'd like to start with a question about how you and City Council handle working with those other public entities. How about starting with the school district, which is preparing for big changes? How do you work with the district to help create a plan that benefits all Shaker residents? And maybe talk about the middle school site. I know we have no, exact plans yet of what's going to go on, and it's a shame we don't have that estate tax anymore, right? But could you talk to me about how you and Dr. Glassner and the school board are working together to figure out what's going to go on?
I'd be happy to. Lots of questions there. I was going to say, I'm happy to answer questions as long as they're easy questions. So, and if they're tough questions, then I'm going to turn over to the staff to help me out on an as needed basis. This is one, and let's just get right to the issue at hand that I know comes up in this discussion, and that's the connection of the working together with Forward Together, and how we all come together to move a number of initiatives forward. Let me just say, Forward Together, for those of you who may not be as familiar, we actually started these discussions back in 2019, pre-pandemic, where we had regular meetings with the library and the schools and residents to talk about big ideas for our community. During the pandemic, things obviously got put on hold a little bit while we were focused on pandemic related items, but then we have picked it back up. The idea for Forward Together was really much broader than I think some people recognize, which is this is a process. This is not a project. We have lots of things that we would like to do, whether it be facility planning, whether it be shared facilities, shared programming, and a wide range of things that we have of joint interest. Frankly, when I was on city council in the late 90s, that was one of the things that I ran on. And I think we met once with the school board, and that was about it. That was the last time I think we could get everybody in the same room together. So let me just start by saying the number of conversations that I and the staff have with Dr. Glasner and Director Schweitzer on a wide range of issues is huge. It's pretty much every week, or at least every other week, that we're talking about a wide range of topics. Facility planning is one of them. And so we started out with very much a public process, lots of issues that were raised from feedback from the community. And that led us to the next stage in the discussions, the schools. So let me back up and just say, but to answer your question directly, how do we really work to do that? Large part of it is the establishing of trust. It's not dissimilar to any other process that you have, bringing together people with disparate ideas and disparate maybe responsibilities and constituencies and funding sources. This is a complicated process. I often tell people this is not for the faint of heart. This is not easy. And if there were a playbook out there, we would have used it. What we're doing is regularly meeting staff to staff, as well as representatives of staff, along with members of the three boards, council, the school board and the library board, to talk about, again, how we can collaborate and coordinate activities that we're doing. I have to say, we each have our responsibilities to our stakeholders. And so while we work, we don't have veto power over anything that any of the three bodies may undertake. But I think we all recognize that we all work for you. And the goal here is to make good, efficient use of our tax dollars, to provide the services that you want and desire in our community, and to keep our community strong and striving. I will leave it there. Lots of parts that we can touch base on, and particularly as it relates the city piece, particularly to recreation.
Right, that's the next question about recreation facilities. What would you like to see across the city? An increase in basketball courts, tennis courts, skate parks, and how will we pay for it?
All good questions. So this is where, well, a couple things. First of all, recreation and the delineation of what we want as a community and can afford was part of, as I mentioned, our goals through our strategic plan. It continues to be. But having said that, we all know Shaker is built out in large respect. And so whether it's recreation facilities or other kinds of development, we have to be very thoughtful and very strategic about how we do that. So it's a combination of things. One is finding out what we want, what the community wants. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is how and where do those facilities or activities or programming take place? And then also, how do we pay for it? The caveat here that I want to stress is that how you answer those questions gets more complicated by the fact that we're talking about a project or an initiative that will take multiple years, maybe 5, 10 or more years. And so there are some gating issues between what the schools are planning, what the city would like, and including what the library has already done and is doing at Bertram Woods. Are cognizant of costs. So that is a regular discussion between the school board, the library, and the city about how these things could for many years. But looking at a long-term facilities plan may provide opportunities that we've not had before. You mentioned the middle school site. Good example. If there were no middle school site middle school at the middle school site, that's a very different landscape than if there is. And then you have other issues of timing. Things like we know we have certain facilities that are reaching the end of its useful life. The ice rink, for example, will be lucky if we get 5 or more years at best out of that facility. And so we need to be thinking really what happens and what do we want to see happen when I get that call from one day from our Director Nichols saying we have a problem. We need to have a plan for what happens long before that day. But it's a cooperative process.
I've been asked just to announce if you're on live stream, sending in questions via Zoom. We just need questions, not comments. That came from the back of the room.
Come to the chat with the mayor, and we can have a
Chat
whole
with the mayor,
conversation.
yeah. A few housing questions. Now, this starts with a statement I'm not sure is true, but you'll tell me. An increasing number of residents are low income. How is the city adapting to meet needs and incorporate these residents in the life of the community? Safe housing and recreation that meets the needs of these residents.
Well, let me say from the outset that our job is to address the entire community and address the needs of those regardless of background or religion or socioeconomic status. Everyone has a different situation, but what we, let me start by saying, our foundation, the core of what we do in everything we do is, frankly, is diversity and inclusion. And that is a fundamental part of us as a community and is something we, with the help of Colleen, that we are focused on every single day. That is what makes us special. That is what makes us strong and makes us a community that stands apart from all others, frankly, not only regionally, but nationally. So our goal is to make sure that we have a wide range of services and housing and other amenities in our community that will keep all residents, provide a home and a place for anyone that wants to live in Shaker Heights. They can find a place to live and send their kids to school and thrive and retire as well. So we focus, specifically about housing. We are focused on that. We have affordable housing throughout the community. We have some multifamily housing that also has an affordable component to it, and that's why specifically I mentioned the Acadia project, where affordable housing again will be a component of that. So those are the ways that we try to address it. Is it perfect? Do we need more resources? Absolutely, but we fight the good fight every day.
Another question is, how are housing indicators compared to national averages? Have you any, knowledge about that?
Housing.
Or are you watching? Yeah, well, the prices you showed of the increased value, national averages, as far as you know, or compare favorably, or?
Yeah, it depends on where you're comparing.
Like not San Francisco or New York
Right,
City.
you'd have to find.
Okay. Yeah.
But we do track it against the county, other communities in the region, as well as national statistics as well.
How about others in Cuyahoga County? Am I off or on? I'm on. Others in Cuyahoga County?
Yeah.
Have you take a look at that
Yes,
frequently?
we do. I'm looking to Kyle Cruson, our building and housing director, and he's shaking. Yes, we do. Some of the data is a little trickier to get than others, but we do.
You've talked about the strengths and accomplishments that the city has made. What are the threats and weaknesses we should be watching for? You've mentioned the lack of, we need more police recruits.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you're worried about in particular right now?
Well, one thing that we frankly always are concerned with is the financial landscape, because that drives much of all of the programs and amenities that we want to provide to our residents are driven by our ability to afford those. And as you mentioned, over the years, we have had some struggles. Loss of the estate tax was a huge blow. For those of you who are in Shaker long enough, will recall that that estate tax, which was between $5 and $6 million a year, roughly on average, basically was our capital funding for our capital budget that went away essentially overnight. So things like that, the local government fund, or funds that we receive from the state, has continued to be eroded. Came from a meeting this morning with other mayors and heard a little bit of what almost happened during the lame duck session at the end of the year. And some of it's frankly very concerning about what's happening in Columbus. So that's one piece. I will say though that our council is also very mindful of that, and make sure we are on the straight and narrow, and that we're making sure we're living within our means. But that really goes to the importance of the economic development and why there's such an imperative to get these projects, not only because they're good for the community, and not necessarily only because, which they are, another reason for doing them, frankly, is an equity aspect to what we're doing. Lee Road is an area that has not had investment over the years that other parts of our community have. So part of the answer there is to address that past history. But the way to do it, and it's multifaceted, is to provide an opportunity to increase our tax base. And Lee Road is a critical component of that.
And I see Laura Engelhardt back there. She's working on all of that, I know.
Yeah, Joyce Braverman, Laura, planning, economic development, very much so.
A question now about the rental house that burned down on Strathaven recently and a woman died. What is the city's role in tenant rights and safety? And did the city know the furnace had been non-working for several weeks? Apparently that's true. What could or should have been done? We're talking about landlord responsibilities and the rights of tenants here.
Mhm. Well, let me say, we're still under investigation on this property. So first of all, it obviously was a terrible and tragic loss of life, and frankly, could have been even worse. So it's to take nothing away from the loss of life that we had, but these are systemic problems that we have in our community. A couple. So, for instance, the importance of having fire fire alarms. Thank you. CO2 monitoring. We have had numerous programs over the years where we give away fire alarms. Our fire department would come over and put them in for you at no charge for either the fire alarm or the putting them in. We also have seen an uptick in the use of space heaters. Frankly, we know when the winter comes that it's almost invariable that people have overplugged space heaters in that provide real risks. So the city's role in this is to inspect homes, which we do, rental homes, and provide enforcement against landlords that did not comply with our building and housing codes. Having said that, we have a lot of rental units, and so we can get to we can't get to them all at the same time. So we have a scheduled process by which we eventually get to all residences. I will say that Director Cruson and I of late have had some conversations about, are there more, how would I say, I guess more aggressive ways that we can find ways to address these issues on a more expedited basis. So let me leave it at that. So we're cognizant of this as something we have we routinely deal with, but I think it may require additional measures.
Here's a question
I
about.
should just mention, just use it as an example. When I first became mayor and we had the fire at Fernway, those are situations where you have processes in place, but you realize sometimes you need to do even more to address those, which is what we did with roofing contractors. This may fall into that same category where you have a different mechanism, but another one to increase enforcement.
This is a question about interdepartmental communications process here. For instance, if fire EMS removes a resident from an apartment building during a medical emergency, when no elevators are inside, is there communication between the fire department and the building and housing department? That sort of thing where one department is affecting the other.
Yeah, and I suspect the question really relates to our multifamily housing with elevators, which may or may not be working at any moment in time. But first of all, in terms of interdepartmental conversations, the answer is absolutely yes. Whether it's informal or formal, whether it's in our management meetings, it's routine communication between all of our directors. That's not an issue. That's not a problem from my perspective. The challenge, quite frankly, has been whether landlords in our community, as well as other communities, are living up to the expectation and the standards that we demand of them. And the pandemic, frankly, has exacerbated this problem. We've all heard about shortages of parts and equipment, shortages of labor, costs going up in some of our views at unreasonable and unwarranted increases, have caused issues for landlords to be able to maintain or get equipment or parts for their building. But also the fact that it's compounded that there are those that have decided, I'm going to exit this market. And so they're not always maintaining the buildings to the standards that we would want. And it's interesting because in some cases, you would never know. If you look at the outside of a facility, it may look terrific. But when you go in, that's when you start to see, and that's why it's the importance of this routine exterior and interior inspections that we do. But just again, to be real candid and open, we've had lots of community discussions with the community, particularly those interested or worried about the condition of multifamily apartment buildings, whether they be in the Larchmere area or elsewhere in the city. And we use both the carrot and the stick regularly, and we communicate to our residents on those. We have kind of a working group that we routinely touch base with on these issues and get input.
Might be dating myself a little bit here, but when it comes to the infill housing, are there any incentives for integration of communities along with the housing, the new units?
Yeah.
I am dating myself.
Well,
Yeah.
well, you and I both are.
Right.
The fund for the future is.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
Yeah, this kind of thing. Yeah, that is not in place anymore. But to my knowledge, we don't have any programs today directly that fit that particular or have that same approach that the Fund for the Future did years ago. But I think it's worth re-examining that issue. I mean, I think diversity and inclusion and the ability to live wherever you want and to encourage integration is something we talk about, we think about, we communicate, we talk amongst our residents, we talk about with the schools, how do we maintain integrated schools, but we don't have the same kind of tools that we have had in the past. And so I think it is something we should be thinking about.
We do have a question, believe it or not, about Horseshoe Lake. Just wanting.
I'd be disappointed if we didn't.
So this questioner would just like you to clarify, is the city following the county NEORSD plan, and therefore there will be no lake? Marshland with park improvements is the plan. This is the question. Is that the plan?
Overall answer is yes. I need to just clarify this specifically, though. Yes, the sewer district's plan involves the removal of the dam, which we all know is 170 years old and is failing. I use the story of going out one day and they had cut a hole in the concrete on the observation deck. And when you look down in there, there was a void, I don't know, Patty, how many feet deep, 10, 20 feet deep, where there was nothing there holding the dam in place. Frankly, it was a miracle that the person that cut the hole in the concrete didn't end up inside the dam itself. So yes, so that will be coming down. And the district has concluded after years of study and analysis that a replacement of the dam does not provide stormwater benefits, and therefore it is really outside the scope of their purview and jurisdiction to address putting a new dam back. And if you just think about it, when was the last time you saw a new dam being built? And the answer is you don't, unless it's for power or water sources. The environmental community is happy that we're putting a natural landscape back into its natural form, because the dam obviously was not natural, built by the Shakers. And so, so yes, it will go back to parkland in its prior state. Having said that, I just want to make sure we're clear. We got lots of input from residents about what they would like to see. And there were a number of different concepts and ideas that the sewer district presented to residents and got their feedback. And so they took a lot of that feedback and will be coming back with some recommendations based on their study, the consultants' work, as well as the input from the community. But it will be based on one of those plans.
Bike lanes. Given the increasing share of bikes and e-bikes as modes of transportation, what's the feasibility of expanding the Lee and Van Aken bike infrastructure into a more connected city network?
Yes, 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 yes. Besides having an electric vehicle, I ride a lot, as do many of our residents. And so a couple things. Maybe micro and macro. On the micro basis, with respect to the Lee Road project in particular, absolutely. One huge component of that project is what is known as a road diet. We have today 2 lanes going in each direction. I drove it this morning, and I'm sure many of you did too, and it is not fun to drive with 4 lanes. So one of clearly one of the ideas that, well, I shouldn't say clearly, one of the ideas that I expect to come out of the study would be a narrowing of the road down to 3 lanes with a 1 lane in each direction with a turn lane in the middle that will enable us to add space along the side of the road for both pedestrian and bikes. Critical component of it. That said, on a micro basis, on a macro basis, we are constantly looking at opportunities. In fact, Ms. Braverman is working right now. In fact, there's a public meeting. Joyce, when is? February 1st virtually, February 8th in person, to look at linking by bike and pedestrian the Van Aken district to the Lee Road project, so that there is a connection between these 2 major commercial districts. We look at bikes. No project goes forward without us at least looking at and determining whether there's some way we can get bike lanes into that into that project.
Well, since you brought up February 1st and 8th, and I just saw in the Sun Press today that John Carroll University, whose plans for Fairmount Circle, I have only just learned about the specifics of it by zooming in on your planning meeting a week and a half ago or so. And there, I think John Carroll is hosting meetings those 2 evenings. Are you aware of this? I mean, but in any case, they're trying to let at least some residents know what's going on. So, but John Carroll has big plans for Fairmount Circle. Those I know you know about because they were brought up at that meeting.
Right.
But now, how is this going to work with John Carroll, University Heights, and Shaker Heights all involved? It's going to be interesting. Huh?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, we are just learning about it as well. For those of you who may not have heard, yeah, John Carroll, I think for many years, but of late, has really looked and started to push forward with a proposed, essentially a redevelopment of the entranceway coming off of Fairmount Circle where in between the BP on one station, and I'll just say Pizzazz because that's an easy landmark on the other side. The concept is a complete redevelopment of that gateway, which then spreads a little bit north beyond the BP and then a little bit onto Fairmount. It's at a very, very early stage. We've just seen some basic plans. The meeting you're referencing, they came to the Planning Commission to just give us a very short heads up as to what was coming down the pike. Just to orient everyone, most of that property is not in Shaker. Actually, the dividing line between University Heights and Shaker Heights goes right down the center of that building that has CVS in it, for instance. And so it's complicated from that standpoint. But the bottom line is, I do believe that when the plan is developed, they would like to redevelop the area that is the portion of it that is in Shaker Heights. Not a huge portion, but a portion. And so we are just beginning to learn what the plans are and then determine how that project will go
So
forward.
do you work with University Heights at the same time?
I was going
Yeah.
to say, I just had a conversation with Mayor Brennan
Uh-huh.
about this as well. And yeah, mayor to mayor, and the hope is also that we put a team together, probably made up of both planning commissions, one for University Heights and one for Shaker, so that we're coordinated in what we're doing.
Related to that, but also other projects, including Arcadia. Residents have given you a lot of input. I listened to that part of the meeting also. So tell us how the input of residents affects the developments. I mean, how does, if, a lot of people complain, or you try to meet their hopes and wishes, but it comes down to money or it comes down to practicality? How does that all play out?
Yeah, let me start by saying, first of all, community input is always important. It's critical. And there are lots of different ways, as many of us know, to provide that kind of feedback, whether it's informal feedback by seeing Nancy or Ann in the grocery store and giving feedback to a project that they've seen or heard about, whether it's more formal in the sense of neighborhood meetings. We have those regularly where groups of residents from different parts of the community can weigh in. It can be also part of formal meetings. We take public comment, both at the Planning Commission as well as at Council. And so there are all kinds of opportunities, and it's very important. Having said that, there are also a lot of other factors that go into it.
Legal factors as well, right?
Yeah, zoning factors, whether, there's setbacks and parking ratios and traffic studies and things that impact those that frankly are way beyond usually it's my ability to understand traffic reports is it's always challenging. But so there are all those kinds of factors that go in that play a part in the approval process or not, both at the Planning Commission and then ultimately at City Council. But the feedback that we get, particularly from those in the neighborhood, is particularly helpful because frankly, we all know, you probably know your streets that you take around your house or apartment better than anybody does. And so you're able to really provide some very, very good feedback. Acadia is a good example. And again, because I'm open and forthright about what we're doing, the residents on Helen Road have had concerns about the impact of that project on their street. We've had multiple meetings with them and will continue to, and in fact have taken ideas and thoughts and feedback that they have provided, and the developer has in fact modified the plan in response to those. Other issues we're going to still have to try to work through, traffic issues in particular. But yeah, it's a critical component of what we do.
Tell us about your work with the administrations of other first-ring suburbs and also with the city of Cleveland. I assume you've met Mayor Bibb and,
Yes.
I'd like to know, we would like to know, I'm sure, about your interactions with those other administrations, the mayors, and what you talk about specifically.
Yeah. So a couple things. The answer is, do we talk? We absolutely do. And again, a number of different formats. The easiest one I'll just mention because I was at one of the meetings this morning are formal groups that meet on that are made up of members of mayors or city managers from either the county or Northeast Ohio more broadly. So we have monthly meetings where we're talking about all kinds of issues, from legislation to the economy to schools to recreation to a wide range of topics. And so we regularly have those conversations. With respect to Mayor Bibb, I have had a chance. For those of you who may not be aware, I'm on the board of the RTA, and so Mayor Bibb was also on the board. So we served together for a brief time before he ran for mayor, and he's terrific, and I respect him quite a bit. He and I have had several conversations, particularly about the Lee Road corridor, and this goes to sort of, what do you talk about? Well, in this case, we were talking very specifically about the Lee Road corridor, and in fact, those discussions led to a coordinated effort between the city of Cleveland and Shaker on that particular project specifically. Mayor Bibb and Joe Jones, the council member in the ward just south of us, are very much very interested in seeing what we're doing and expanding that and doing it simultaneously in the city of Cleveland. Ultimately, to actually redo the corridor all the way down to 480. But we are working very closely with the City of Cleveland's planning department and building officials, and in fact coordinating grant applications and all kinds of things so that we can have a very efficient, economical, and meaningful project. In fact, the fact that we're coordinating what we're doing has enabled us to receive funding. In fact, we have a meeting, I think, tomorrow morning, which should be the second last approval that we need for funding of about $13 million from NOACA specifically for this Lee Road project. And I don't know that we would have received those dollars, or at least in that magnitude, without it being a coordinated and really a regional effort. So yes, so we talk specifically about particular projects, as well as generally how we're doing. During the pandemic in particular, we had more of an informal group of a number of mayors from our area, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, South Euclid, that talked about, literally, we were on the phone probably every other day about pandemic-related issues. The group of mayors in this part of, in our area, in our region, are very collaborative and very open and very helpful. We share information all the time. So,
Shaker Square, any comments about development there, or how Shaker impacts, our development here impacts there, which it does, obviously.
Yeah, let's start with making sure everyone's on factually the same page, because many are confused by the fact that it's called Shaker Square. That it's and our border is, just call it at Shaker and Coventry, roughly. What makes it more confusing is that the school district, through some quirky fate of history, is actually larger than the municipal boundaries. So there are areas around Shaker Square that are actually part of the school district. Having said that, even if the school district wasn't there, Shaker Square is a critical asset to Shaker, and is something that during the foreclosure process that was going on, I was regularly both kept apprised of and also provided input to that process. Tanya Maness, who used to be our economic development director, both she and CDCs and the city and the county did, my hats off though, particularly to Tanya, did a masterful job working through that process to keep a local control of Shaker Square. Through my professional career prior to being mayor, Shaker Square is, and how many people from Shaker live in the neighborhood.
So we have just another comment to wind up. If we can't get to all the questions tonight, how can residents ask their questions? When's the next chat with the mayor, if you know? And what is your email address?
Well, first of all, Kim, did we decide on February 18th is the next chat with the mayor? I don't think we have a location. I try to move it around so that it's easily accessible to the entire community. So I'm not sure where, but feel free. I do try to keep the conversations reasonably brief just so that I can talk to everyone who comes. So if it's something of a longer nature, yes. Or I can set up a separate time. The email is mayor@shakeronline.com. And Kim McCula is my assistant, and she does a masterful job keeping me on track on getting back to people who reach out.
I think Annette will have the final word, but thank you so much, Mayor Weiss.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Marcia. Yeah, just a couple closing comments. I want to thank everybody here for attending and participating, for asking important questions, and for caring about the future of our community of Shaker Heights. It is time to close because our participants have been on the hot seat for an hour and a half and they need a break. And we also have to vacate the building in a very few minutes. We have done our best to cover all the topics and the questions coming from our live audience and from our live stream audience. There are many thank yous to issue. I want to thank State Representative Juanita Bryant for braving the weather and joining us in person tonight.
Good evening. Good to see you.
I also want to thank the mayor's staff and many city council members who have come out tonight to join us and be backup in case there were very specific questions. Thank you to the building staff. Erie and Chiree have been working hard to make sure we're all comfortable. Thank you to our videographer, Louis Burrell, his assistant, Marcus. The video of tonight's session will be posted on YouTube on a channel that you can find by Googling League of Women Voters Greater Cleveland. You will also find the link on Facebook and on our website. And thank you to all the League volunteers who participated in making this successful tonight and reaching many people in the city. And finally, if you are not a League member, if you found this evening interesting or worthwhile, please join us. And there's information about joining us on the table over here. We're easy to find on the internet under lwvgreatercleveland.org. Thank you and good night.
I do see Councilman Claytor here this evening too. Thank you for coming.